All right, today we're diving into a really powerful and frankly provocative open letter. It's aimed directly at the generation holding the smartphone. The title is The Architecture of a Synthetic Revolution, and trust me, it makes a pretty startling claim right out of the gate. Let's get into it.
See, the author pulls zero punches. This is the core idea of the entire letter. It's a straight-up accusation that a really sophisticated kind of psychological manipulation is happening right now, arguing that the very tools you use to connect with the world, well, they're being used to build a cage around your thoughts.
So what's the end goal of this manipulation? The author has a name for it: a synthetic revolution. Think about that. It looks like a rebellion. It feels like a rebellion. It might even sound like an uprising against the system. But the letter argues it's all a performance, carefully designed and promoted by the exact power structures it claims to be fighting. To really get this, the author starts by taking us back to their initial hopes for this digitally native generation. They genuinely believed this generation was going to be an exit strategy from all the old, tired politics of the past. And just look at the contrast here. On the one hand, the hope was for a generation that was just too connected, too smart to fall for the same old divisions. But the reality, as the author sees it in 2026, couldn't be more different. Instead of being set free by the internet, this generation is being harvested. Their attention, their energy, is being funneled into movements that don't actually help them. And this isn't just some abstract theory. The letter points to real-world examples happening across Europe. You've got the TikTok-fueled surge of parties like the Liberal Alliance in Denmark. You have youth movements in the Balkans and Eastern Europe getting more and more radicalized, arguing over flags and borders, while, as the author claims, the oligarchs just keep getting richer. Okay, so how does this actually work, right? How do you take these old reactionary ideas and make them look fresh and rebellious? This is what the author calls the rise of the cool reactionary. At the very heart of this is what the author calls a psychological magic trick. It's all about taking ideas that are traditionally, pretty negative or conservative, and then, with a little sleight of hand, making them seem exciting, edgy, even anti-establishment. This slide just lays out the trick perfectly. On the left, you have something like pure selfishness, but on the right, it's rebranded as individual freedom. Nationalism that excludes people is suddenly about protecting heritage. And get this, voting against the social safety nets that your own generation needs, that's framed as a punk rock move. It's a complete inversion of what these words actually mean. So what's the engine that's driving this whole magic trick? Well, according to the letter, it's the technology itself. Let's get into the mechanics of what the author calls the algorithmic cage and see how it makes this kind of high-speed radicalization possible. Okay, so the psychological reason this all works, according to the author, is something called significance quest theory. The idea is actually pretty simple. When you're facing these huge, overwhelming problems, climate change, economic anxiety, war, your brain naturally starts looking for a sense of meaning, for an identity, for a place to belong, just to feel significant again. And the algorithms, they know this. And here's the four-step process the author claims is used to exploit that vulnerability. First, you're online, looking for community. Step 2, the algorithm senses that need, that void. Then, and this part is absolutely crucial, it doesn't feed you information or facts, it feeds you an identity. It tells you who you are, and more importantly, who your enemy is. And before you even realize what's happening, an echo chamber is built around you so fast, you don't even see the walls going up. The author then offers this incredibly powerful counterpoint. They argue that this algorithm-fed identity, that's not rebellion, not even close. Real rebellion isn't about protecting your little in-group. It's the much harder, much less glamorous work of protecting the rights and the well-being of total strangers. This brings us to the actual politicians, faces of these movements. The author is really critical of the young candidates who lead this synthetic revolution, arguing that what they're promoting is a really dangerous politics of me. The letter claims that even though these young politicians might look and sound like they're part of the generation they claim to represent, what they're really practicing is self-interest disguised as service. They're incentivized by likes, by shares, to get more radical, more divisive, basically building their personal careers by breaking their own generation into smaller and smaller pieces. This slide really just nails the core conflict. The candidates are pushing a worldview that's all about me, my freedom, my heritage, my interests. But the author's point is that the massive challenges this generation is facing, from the climate to the economy, can only be solved by a politics of us. And the result of all this is, well, it's heartbreaking. The author calls it the great inversion.
It's this phenomenon where young people are convinced to vote against the very democratic systems, the social safety nets, the international cooperation that, according to this letter, are the only things that can guarantee their own future freedom and survival.
So the letter wraps up with a final, really urgent warning. It shifts from just analyzing the problem to giving direct, actionable advice for anyone who feels like they might be caught in this digital trap. Which leads to the ultimate question, right? How do you break free? If the architecture of your own mind is being messed with, how do you even recognize it and step outside? Well, the author offers a few clear rules of thumb. Here are the key takeaways. First, distrust the vibe. If a political movement is based more on aesthetics than substance, that's a red flag. Second, if a political idea can be perfectly captured in a meme, it's probably designed to manipulate, not inform. Third, if a message makes you feel superior to some other group, you're not a rebel, you're being used as a tool. And finally, and this is maybe the biggest one, if billionaires are cheering on your rebellion, you can be almost certain it's not a real one. And this is the final, chilling image the author leaves us with, a warning that these synthetic revolutions are just the ultimate distraction. They get you all fired up, arguing passionately about trivial things, like the color of the fire extinguisher, while the real, structural problems are literally burning the building down around you. It's a provocative thought to end on, and it really makes you wonder, what would a real rebellion even look like today?